She was on your screen one week, crying, fighting, promising forever. The next week, she was gone, fired, cut out, and suddenly facing immigration trouble no one warned her about. This was the moment everything flipped, and it happened fast. How does a messy reality TV love story spiral into legal chaos and exile without a single public explanation? Jasmine Pineda did not get a farewell episode. No goodbye montage. No official statement. One day she existed inside the 90-Day Fiance universe. Loud, emotional, impossible to ignore. The next day, silence. TLC said nothing. The show moved on. And Jasmine was left dealing with consequences far bigger than hurt feelings or a bad edit. According to public claims and reporting, her firing lined up with legal pressure and immigration questions that escalated behind closed doors. That timing matters. Because this was not only about a breakup or a storyline running out of steam. Somewhere in the background, a lawsuit allegedly surfaced. Not discussed on camera. Not explained to viewers. And if immigration status enters the picture, everything changes. Paperwork becomes pressure. Deadlines become fear. And silence becomes dangerous. Viewers saw tears and chaos. What they did not see was how fast the ground shifted under her feet. Think about the setup. A foreign cast member. Limited control. Trust placed in producers, contracts, and a system that promises guidance while filming keeps rolling. Then suddenly, the safety net disappears. No public defense. No network support. And the person at the center learns after the fact that life-altering issues were already in motion. That is where confusion turns into panic. And this is where the story stops feeling like TV and starts feeling personal. Because one hidden detail changes how every scene before it looks. Here is the question nobody answered. If a lawsuit existed and immigration risk was real, who knew and when? Did the network stay quiet to protect itself? Or was Jasmine left to absorb damage while the show protected its brand? Silence does not happen by accident in television. Silence is a choice. Fans noticed edits shifting. Clips reframed. Emotional outbursts suddenly labeled unstable instead of reactive. Meanwhile, the show kept airing. Revenue kept flowing. And the person whose life was unraveling was erased from the conversation. Fired quietly. Removed cleanly. Left to deal with consequences alone. But right when it looked like she had no power left, Jasmine made one move behind the scenes that changed what comes next. And that move is why this story refuses to disappear. Before everything collapsed, Jasmine was not a mystery. She was familiar. Loud. Emotional. Sometimes exhausting. Sometimes funny without trying. She came on 90-Day Fiance as the kind of cast member people argued about online at midnight. Half the audience defended her. Half rolled their eyes. But almost everyone watched. And that mattered. From the start, Jasmine was framed as intense. She cried hard. She loved hard. She fought hard. Viewers joked about the meltdowns, but there is something else underneath. She was far from home. Speaking a second language, living inside a pressure cooker where every reaction became content. Some fans felt protective. Others felt annoyed. Still, she never felt fake. She felt raw. And raw sells. Her relationship with Gino became the center of gravity. Trust issues, money stress, power imbalance. We saw arguments that felt messy and unresolved, but we also saw vulnerability, moments where she looked scared, moments where she talked about leaving everything behind for love. Those scenes hit because they were relatable. Who has not trusted the wrong person or believed things would work out because someone promised they would? And this is where the bond with the audience quietly formed, because whether you liked her or not, you understood the risk she was taking. Behind the scenes, Jasmine believed she was not alone. That is key. Reality TV sells chaos, but it also sells safety. Cast members sign contracts. They meet producers. They get reassured, not in writing sometimes, but in tone, in repetition, in the way people speak with confidence. You are fine. This is handled. We will flag issues early. nothing to worry about. Those phrases matter when you are new to a country. Marriage added another layer. Immigration paperwork, deadlines, interviews, stress that never shows fully on camera. For viewers, it looked like drama. For her, it was life. And she believed the show knew that. She believed the system would not let her fall through cracks without warning. That belief shaped her choices. What she said on camera, what she agreed to film, what she ignored. There was also money, not luxury money, survival money, appearances, future plans, stability. The show represented opportunity, a chance to build something. So when producers kept filming, she assumed everything was still okay. No alarms, no pauses, no hard stops. If something was wrong, surely someone would say so. That was the trust. And this is where calm sets in, because nothing looks broken yet, but you can feel pressure building under the surface. Looking back, viewers now point out moments that feel different, scenes that linger too long on her reactions. Conversations cut short, arguments framed without context. At the time, it felt like editing. Now it feels like foreshadowing, not proof, just a feeling. Something was shifting. Fans online started asking questions before answers existed. Why does she look more anxious lately? Why do conversations about the future feel vague? Why does production avoid certain topics? Those questions floated around quietly, drowned out by louder drama. And that is how warning signs get missed. Noise covers them. Still, Jasmine stayed. She filmed. She talked about love. She talked about plans. She talked about staying. That only makes sense if you believe the ground beneath you is stable. People do not plan futures while expecting collapse. That contradiction matters. Then came the first crack. Not a scream, not a fight, a silence. Missed updates. Delayed clarity. Something she should have known sooner arriving late. And once trust slips, everything before it looks different. Because when reassurance replaces protection, you only realize the difference after something goes wrong. So here's the question that pushes this forward. If warning signs existed and risk was real, why did filming continue like nothing was wrong? And who benefited from keeping her calm until the moment it was too late? Something shifts here. Not loud, not explosive. Quieter than that. This is where the cracks form behind the camera, where the show keeps smiling while pressure builds off screen. On TV, scenes still looked familiar. Arguments. Tears. Reconciliation talk. The usual cycle. But certain things stopped appearing. Conversations felt trimmed. Questions felt unanswered. Emotional reactions stayed, but the reasons behind them felt thinner. Viewers noticed something was missing, even if they could not name it yet. Editing matters. What gets cut matters more. When a reaction stays, but the context disappears, the person starts to look unstable instead of stressed. And stress was everywhere. Immigration timelines, marriage strain, money worries. None of that vanished. It just stopped being explained. This is where silence enters the story, not as background noise, but as an active force shaping what you see. Behind the scenes, filming continued. That detail matters. If a situation is serious enough to stop production, it stops. Cameras pause. Legal teams step in. But cameras did not stop. Scenes kept getting scheduled. Confessionals kept rolling. That sends a message to the cast. Things must be fine, or at least manageable. Meanwhile, viewers saw Jasmine grow more reactive. Shorter patience. Sharper tone. People online called her dramatic. Others called her unhinged. Few asked why the pressure seemed heavier without explanation. Silence lets assumptions do the work. There were moments where conversations jumped. A serious issue hinted at, then dropped. Plans discussed without details. Future talk that sounded rehearsed, but hollow. That is not proof of manipulation. But it is a pattern worth noticing. When information disappears, narrative control fills the gap. And this is where discomfort sets in. Because nothing obvious is wrong, but nothing feels right either. Silence protects someone. The question is always who. When the show avoids naming problems, it avoids responsibility. When viewers do not know stakes, they cannot judge fairly. And when a cast member does not know risks in real time, choices get made under false calm. Fans later went back and rewatched. They spotted small things. Lines cut short, reactions shown without buildup, arguments framed as emotional explosions rather than responses. Editing does not need lies to change perception. Omission works faster. All this happened while one issue stayed completely off camera. Legal pressure. Not gossip, not rumor. Something with paperwork. Something with consequences. Something serious enough that, once it surfaced, filming reportedly stopped fast. That contrast matters. Months of silence. Then sudden action. Because once a legal trigger gets pulled, the tone changes instantly, and the next step exposes who knew what long before the cameras went dark. Then the shock lands. Not through a phone call from the network. Not from a serious sit-down on camera. According to public claims and reporting, the first clear sign came from outside the system she trusted. An alleged lawsuit. Filed quietly. Real enough to carry weight. And timed in a way that changes how everything before it feels. This was not about gossip money. $70,000 sounds big on paper, but the number itself was not the danger. The danger was paperwork. Courts. Deadlines. Records. When civil issues show up, immigration notices pay attention. That fear hits fast when you are not a citizen. It hits harder when nobody warned you it was coming. Picture the contradiction. On screen, Jasmine was filming scenes about fixing things, talking about the future, acting like the road ahead existed. Off screen, something legal was already moving. That gap between reality and performance matters. People do not play house while their legal ground shakes, unless they believe somebody else is watching out for them. And this is the moment viewers realize timing is not a coincidence, because silence before a legal filing changes meaning after it surfaces. Emotionally, the reaction makes sense. Shock. Betrayal. Panic. If you learn late, your options shrink. Calm turns into urgency. Trust turns into anger. According to accounts, this discovery triggered a confrontation. Not for drama, for answers. Why was filming still happening? Why was nobody up front? Who decided silence was safer than honesty? Now the fair counterpoint. Networks are not lawyers. Producers do not file immigration forms. Contracts spell out responsibility. That argument exists, and it matters. But here's the reframe. When a system profits from your vulnerability, reassurance carries weight. When reassurance replaces warning, harm follows faster. Receipts matter too. Filming reportedly stopped almost immediately after the confrontation. That tells you something changed overnight. Whatever was manageable before was no longer safe once the issue surfaced openly. The same situation, different reaction, based on exposure. That is the uncomfortable part. This is where fear creeps in quietly. Because legal pressure does not stay contained, it spreads into every part of life. Immigration anxiety does not wait. It magnifies everything. Every meeting feels heavier. Every delay feels dangerous. And when support disappears at the same time, isolation sets in. According to multiple accounts, this was the point where production halted, security stepped in, and legal teams entered the picture. Not gradually. Immediately. That speed tells its own story. Months of calm. Then a hard stop. Whatever line was crossed, it was not emotional. It was legal. And when cameras shut down without explanation, the next question becomes unavoidable. If everything was fine before, why did everything stop the moment paperwork entered the room? After the halt, there was no statement, no clarification, No careful explanation to the audience that had been watching this story unfold for years. There was just absence. And absence in media is never neutral. Episodes aired with changes people felt but could not immediately explain. Scenes shifted. Context vanished. Emotional beats landed differently. Jasmine's presence thinned, then disappeared. Not with a farewell. Not with a resolution arc. Just gone. Like a sentence cut mid-word. Gino stayed. That contrast did more than any press release ever could. One half of the story continued. The other half dissolved. Viewers were left to fill the gaps themselves, and when that happens, perception hardens fast. Silence invites assumptions. Editing shapes memory, and memory decides who looks unstable and who looks reasonable. This is where narrative control becomes visible. Because the story does not end, it gets reassigned. Without explanation, Jasmine's earlier moments were reframed by omission. Emotional scenes lost their pressure context. Reactions that once looked human now looked excessive. Viewers who missed off-screen developments judged only what remained on screen. That is power, not to lie but to select. Meanwhile, Gino's continuity suggested normalcy, stability, reliability. The show moved forward as if nothing had happened. No on-air acknowledgement of disruption. No acknowledgement of legal tension. No acknowledgement of removal. That silence worked quietly, smoothing the narrative so the machine could keep running. Fans noticed. Online discussions shifted tone. Sympathy faded in some corners. Confusion grew in others. The lack of closure became its own message. If nothing is said, people assume nothing important happened. Or worse, that the person removed must have deserved it. And this is where frustration peaks, because erasure feels cleaner than accountability. Networks protect brands by protecting continuity. Cast members who remain get stability. Those who exit without explanation lose narrative footing. They cannot correct framing. They cannot contextualize emotion. They are frozen in the version last shown. That is not neutrality. That is selection. What makes this colder is how fast it happens. Years of footage, seasons of emotional investment, and then a quiet fade out. No goodbye, no thanks, no acknowledgement that a human life was disrupted behind the scenes, just a new edit and a moving timeline. This is not about who is right or wrong in a relationship. It is about control. Who gets to speak? Who gets cut? Who gets remembered with complexity? And who gets reduced to a highlight reel of reactions? Because once someone disappears without explanation, their absence rewrites their past. Viewers forget context. Emotion becomes spectacle. Risk becomes drama. And the chilling part is not that this happened. The chilling part is how easily it happened, how cleanly the story moved on, and how quickly a person can vanish from the narrative without a single word explaining why. This is where the story stops feeling like television and starts feeling like real life. Immigration pressure does not arrive as one dramatic moment. It creeps. It tightens. It turns everyday tasks into sources of fear. For someone in Jasmine's position, everything suddenly carries weight. A letter in the mail is no longer just mail. A missed call feels dangerous. Appointments blur together. You replay conversations in your head, wondering what you should have asked sooner, what you assumed was handled, what you trusted others to flag before it became serious. Civil issues do not live in a vacuum. Even when they are not criminal, they create records. Records talk to systems. Systems share information. And when your right to stay depends on paperwork staying clean, any complication feels like standing on cracked ice. You do not know where it will break. You only know it might. This is the part viewers rarely see, because fear like this is quiet and constant, not loud or dramatic. There is no villain monologue, no warning bell, just mounting pressure. Sleep gets harder, decisions feel rushed, support feels thinner, and when you are far from home, everything amplifies. language barriers, cultural distance, the sense that one wrong step could change your entire future. When authorities step in, it is not chaos. It is procedure. Names checked, papers reviewed, waiting rooms, holding spaces that feel colder than they look. Detention processing, when it happens, is not about punishment. It is about control and verification. But emotionally, it feels like suspension. Your life pauses while decisions move without you. For viewers who dislike Jasmine on screen, this is often where perspective shifts. You do not have to like someone to understand fear. You do not have to approve of their choices to recognize vulnerability. Immigration stress strips people down to basics. Safety, stability, home. This is where sympathy grows quietly, because no personality trait prepares you for uncertainty at this scale. According to accounts, the outcome came without spectacle. No dramatic send-off, no camera closure, just removal. Deportation is not always loud. Sometimes it is paperwork completed, bags packed quickly, and a flight booked without ceremony. You leave behind unfinished conversations, unfinished plans, and a version of your life that no longer exists. What stays is the emotional residue, embarrassment, anger, grief, relief mixed with loss. Returning somewhere familiar does not undo what happened. It just gives you ground again. And that is where this chapter ends. Not with outrage, not with revenge, with a person leaving quietly, carrying the weight of a system that moved faster than the story ever showed, and a silence that followed her all the way home after everything settles. The silence does not. It spreads. Not just around Jasmine, but through the industry itself. Reality television runs on access, and access runs on obedience. When something goes wrong, people do not rush to speak. They watch, they measure risk, they protect their place in line. Quiet support is real, but it is private. Messages sent off camera. Sympathy whispered, not posted. Former cast members know the rules even after they are done filming. Contracts do not end when the season airs. They linger. Non-disclosure clauses. Reputation clauses. Future casting hopes. The cost of honesty is rarely abstract. It is immediate. This is how fear culture works. No threats needed. The system teaches people what silence is worth. From the network side, silence is strategy. Responding creates precedent. Acknowledging risk invites scrutiny. So the safest move is to say nothing and let time smooth the edges. Viewers move on. Algorithms move faster. Outrage cools, and a story without official confirmation slowly becomes old noise. But the question does not disappear. It shifts. Could this happen again? Could someone else trust the process, assume protection, and only learn the truth when it is too late? That is the discomfort that lingers beyond this one case. Because the structure remains unchanged. Reality TV blurs work and life in ways most jobs do not. Your emotions become content. Your stress becomes storyline. And when your real-world consequences collide with production schedules, priorities get tested. Not everyone gets protected equally. Not everyone gets a clean exit. This is where the system becomes the antagonist, not through malice, but through design. Viewers are part of this ecosystem too. Consumption rewards chaos. Ratings reward escalation. The machine learns what we watch and repeats it. That does not make viewers villains, but it does make reflection necessary. What kind of stories feel harmless until they are not? And then, quietly, the focus shifts back to Jasmine. Not the character, the person. Outside the edit, outside the contracts. Regaining agency does not mean winning a lawsuit or clearing a name publicly. Sometimes it means telling your story on your own terms, or choosing not to at all. Agency can look small. Rebuilding privately. Setting boundaries. Refusing to be reduced to clips. That choice matters, especially in an industry that profits from exposure. This is not a neat ending. Systems rarely collapse because of one person. But awareness grows in moments like this. Cast members pay closer attention. Viewers ask sharper questions. Silence feels heavier. And in that space, Jasmine is no longer just a storyline. She becomes a reminder that behind every edited arc is a real person navigating consequences the camera does not follow. Even after the chaos, Jasmine did not act impulsively. She gathered what mattered most: documents, emails, recordings, pieces of her story that existed outside the edit. Every file was a reminder of what actually happened, not what was shown on screen. Control over the narrative no longer came from producers or contracts. It came from her. Silence became a strategy, not a surrender. She could have lashed out publicly, created headlines, sparked outrage. But choosing noise over patience might have diluted the truth. By waiting, by organizing, she maintained authority over facts. She was not motivated by revenge. She was motivated by clarity. Accuracy mattered more than drama. This is where empowerment feels subtle but unshakable. Of course, TLC might argue differently. They could say production decisions were standard, legal obligations were clear, and casting practices were transparent. They could frame her removal as routine, inevitable even. But the risk of silence cuts both ways. When the truth is hidden, even the network is vulnerable to leaks, internal scrutiny, and questions about responsibility. Public perception can shift quickly, and facts matter more than spin. Counterpoints also exist for viewers. Some might ask, could this have been prevented by better communication? Could Jasmine have acted differently? Could producers have stepped in sooner? Each question complicates the moral picture. Accountability is layered, messy. Yet the weight of consequences landed heavily on one person. That is the tension. Even as she remained quiet, Jasmine was not passive. She connected with former staff, confirmed details, and ensured her side of the story could be verified if ever needed. This was strategy, not spectacle. Each step reinforced that control over the narrative is not automatic. It has to be earned, maintained, and sometimes defended silently. The emotional pull here is unmistakable. Power does not equal protection, and silence is both shield and risk. The industry watches too. Producers, former cast, and advocates all know the stakes. How far does loyalty extend when contracts expire? How much does fear influence truth-telling? The consequences of this case ripple quietly, and everyone inside knows it. By the end, Jasmine stands at a threshold. She has reclaimed what the cameras never showed: her voice, her story, her choice. But questions linger. What will happen if these documents see the light of day? How will the network respond? And most importantly, who else could face the same pressures, hidden from viewers, when ratings outweigh human consequence? That unresolved tension is what keeps this story alive and sets the stage for the next chapter of Revelations. Jasmine's journey does not end with her flight back to Panama. The cameras stopped, the contracts were severed, but the consequences lingered. Every deleted scene, every altered clip, every silent moment from the network marked a gap between what the world saw and what really happened. It is in those gaps that her story holds its weight. She endured confusion, betrayal, and fear, but she also reclaimed control in ways no edit could ever capture. Her silence was deliberate, her preparation meticulous. The power that had been stripped from her on screen now rested quietly in her hands. She became more than a reality star. She became a keeper of facts, a holder of proof, and a symbol of what happens when structures designed for spectacle collide with real lives. And yet, even now, questions remain unanswered. What exactly triggered the network's swift decisions? Who knew more than they admitted? And how much of what was shown was shaped to protect some while leaving others exposed? The story Jasmine began telling quietly behind closed doors is far from finished. Evidence, insiders, and messages are ready to surface. And when they do, the reality she lived could reshape everything viewers thought they knew. Next time, the hidden communications leak, and the truth behind the edits might shock even the most loyal fans.